Wanna talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk.
Good evening. Welcome to the final hour of Talk to Solomon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Stan Solomon. I am the host, and my co-host,
Chief Steve.
former Police Chief Steve Davis, lawman extraordinaire, and also co-hosting my friend Greg Howard, financial expert, MondayHope.com. Greg, how are you?
I'm fine. Good evening.
And Greg has a show now that he wants everyone to know about. Greg, tell us about it.
Yes, I'm on the flagship of Conservative Report on Blog Talk Radio, Thursday night show, 6 to 8 p.m., and we put the link out on Twitter every Wednesday and Thursday.
Very good. All right. Now, we welcome back to the show after a week off doing what his wife wanted him to do, which happens to the best of us, former Ambassador Alan Keyes. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Stan. How are you?
Is
Good
your
evening,
wife-
Chief.
You said good evening.
Oh, good evening. I didn't hear you. Stan was in my ear too loudly.
Sorry.
Good evening.
At any rate, I hope your wife is happy now that you did what father and husband is supposed to do.
Well, I hope so. It's the advice that I give to all folks, and after you've been married for a little while, you learn that lesson, that the priority is always to do what your wife wants you to do.
If mama's not happy, nobody's
You're not happy.
You got it. All right. Alan, I want to start with I don't know if the word is startling, but it should be an eye-opening situation where 67%, I believe it is, of the people in this country want the government to do even more than it's doing now. Or maybe it's 67% of Democrats. That's what it is.
Right, I can believe that.
67% of Democrats want the government to give more, do more, and be in charge of more.
Because actually, what I had seen suggested that if you just take overall in the country, a majority of the people don't want the government doing more, but a majority of the Democrats do.
That's exactly correct.
And that's very telling because it identifies the Democrat Party as the flagship of socialism in America, right? Now, between you and me, I wouldn't want you to do a poll amongst the elites in this country, excluding all the grassroots people, because who knows, but 80% of them think the government ought to be doing more, regardless of party. And that's one of the problems we face in the country. But I don't think it should be at all surprising. I had this experience the other day. I was listening to a report about Paul Ryan's speech on Obama, right, and his stand on abortion. And the headline read that Ryan blasts Obama, and then in the body of the text, the big blast was to say that Obama hasn't lifted a finger to help the unborn, a hand, hasn't lifted a hand to help the unborn. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, now, does anybody even halfway familiar with Obama's record think that that's something that ought to shock or surprise anybody? It's a little bit like saying, I don't know, Adolf Hitler never lifted a hand to save the Jews, when in point of fact, killing the Jews is his idea, right? So Obama is the high priest of the culture of death, and Ryan thinks it's a big criticism of him to say he hasn't lifted a hand, and he leaves out all the really bad stuff. It doesn't make any sense. So someone comes and tells you, most people who are Democrats want the government to do more, and I'm thinking, okay, this is not news. This is why they are Democrats. This is why we don't support them or vote for them, because they actually believe in socialism and think the government ought to be dominating our lives. So I don't think it's startling, Stan. It's just a reminder that I guess you can't take these things for granted, because as the generations pass, new people need to be introduced to the hard facts of life. But Americans out there who understand their responsibilities, I don't think they're in the category of people who want the government to do this and do that and do the other thing. The politicians want you to believe that, most of them. Oh, they want me to do this, and they want the government to do that, and they want help with this and that. Most people would be just as content as they could be if the government did two things: get out of their way and leave their money in their pocket, see, until they decided to spend it. Now, of course, the latter would involve abolishing the income tax, which we ought to do. But nonetheless, I think you could turn this country around psychologically in many respects, especially economically, if you simply did those two things. Get the government out of the way of the people so they can get on with the business of taking care of themselves, and get the government's hand, its preemptive income tax armed unconstitutional hand, out of their pockets.
I couldn't agree with you more. Greg, comment?
Well, of course, once again, Alan is exactly right. One of the problems is why we're having to borrow for student loans. Let's just take a simple example, why people cannot afford to go to college. The government has artificially inflated the price of college 25% in just the last 4 years. This has been because the government has created artificial money for college. Therefore, because the supply of money available for college through student loans has risen, therefore the price of the commodity has risen to match the available money supply for it. That's reason number one. Two, people are not able to save the money for college because they're being taxed to death. They're being taxed to death directly through taxes. Last time we had Alan on the show, we talked about the insidious tax of inflation, which is managed by the Federal Reserve. So people have no disposable income that they can set aside for their children's education. When I was a kid, parents set aside money. You know, I was born in 1960. You know, very first thing I did when I was a little kid is here's your savings account for college, and you know, every time I mowed a lawn and I got $2 for it, I stuck it in that savings account. And you know, we learned to save money for the future. Now it's all a borrowing society. So just that example alone, the Dr. Keys, or Alan, I love to call him Alan, I feel so privileged, has put on the table, we cannot afford, and therefore we feel the government has to help in all these areas. And that is just one simple example of why people turn to government to help them and why the government should do more.
See, I actually think, I absolutely agree wholeheartedly, and I think that part of the problem is a kind of induced demand, what you were just describing in some ways. Government action in some way instills a demand or creates a demand in the population for more government services, right? And more government this and that and the other thing. And they then try to pretend that all the people in the country are clamoring for this and they won't vote for us if we don't give them this. But in point of fact, they gave people the idea that this ought to be the government's business. It's not an idea that occurred naturally to them because they kind of thought it was their business to take care of themselves. Most Americans still do. And if my experience with my kids is any indication, they reach a certain age when this becomes a point of firm insistence, right? Because it's part of the dignity of being a free person. But I think we live in an age when the sort of what I call the elitist faction leaders are interested in usurping the role of the people. They want to take power away from them and keep it in control in their own hands. And what's the best way to do that, especially if you're starting from a society that's democratically based, where you have to ask the people at election time who they want? Well, you try to demoralize the character of the people, get them into a position where they start clamoring for dependence and so forth and so on. And then you, having done your work, you then try to pretend that this demand was there before you created it. What adds insult to injury, by the way, and I have to bring this up because it just bothered me deeply, is that the very politicians who instill this demand in people, artificially create it, will then turn around and treat people with contempt because they have responded. So if you're somebody who actually takes the benefit from the government, then you're just deplorable and awful. We spend all this time, the politicians will say, creating the tax breaks and so forth and so on. Then if people actually take advantage of them, then you call them names and say that they're dependency-minded and heap opprobrium and contempt all over them. I hate this system, and I hate what it's making of our people. And when I read the other day, yesterday, day before, what Mitt Romney had to say to his elitist faction buddies behind closed doors at one of these billionaire breakfast club meetings or something. I don't know what it was. And he's actually suggesting that well, if people have put themselves in a position where they don't pay taxes, then and then he puts all kinds of nasty labels on them. They're dependency minded, they're entitlement minded, and so forth. Now, I'll admit, some people in this country are. But I don't think I'd identify them on the basis of whether or not they have done what all the rich people who contribute to these politicians do. Figure out how they can minimize the amount of money they give to the government. And the fact that you create all of these different provisions and special breaks for this, that, and the other thing, the fact that people take advantage of that simply means they want to keep more of their own money. Is that a crime in this country now? Well, apparently not, because all the things, he didn't imply that anybody was doing this illegally. So all the things that people are doing, they're doing on the basis of what's in the tax code that says you can deduct this, you can take that out of your tax thing. How dare you criticize people for doing what they have the perfect legal right to do, especially after these politicians have demonstrated that but the more money we put in their hands, the more they will waste it, the more they will destroy our faith and credit as a people, the more they will hand off the income and treasure of the American people to satisfy the cronies who support their political empires. I didn't notice him bad-mouthing his hedge fund hogs when they are looking out for themselves and taking advantage of the situation in order to make money. And everybody said, well, Alan, they just used their shrewdness. And I'm thinking, yeah, they used their shrewdness. But guess what? Whether it's where they put their money or where they get it from, if the system collapsed and had collapsed because somebody couldn't take this or that out of the taxpayers' pockets, they would have suffered too. See? So the idea that you are then going to badmouth people in this country, and he thinks, by the way, and a lot of people may go along with him, I don't know, that he was just talking about people who are, you know, Democrats who are entitlement-minded and welfare-dependent and all of this. Well, first of all, the people who get welfare benefits don't pay taxes on those benefits. So when you say not paying this, that, and the other thing, you're not talking about them because they're not liable to pay taxes. So who are you talking about? You're talking about the folks who actually work for a living, who then take their deductions, or the people who get Social Security. Well, last time I looked, y'all, I know a lot of people like to act like Social Security is a welfare program, but people who get Social Security benefits paid into the system throughout their working life. And they don't even get and haven't even gotten a fair return on their money, a lot of them. So at the end of the day, I just find it contemptible that these sick elitists are now going to turn on the people because the people are taking advantage of the programs and benefits and entitlements that these guys have created. And I was especially offended when Romney did it. I got to tell you. Because this is a guy who spent most of his political life helping to create entitlement programs, including, he mentioned people who think they're entitled to health care. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, you didn't seem to mind those people when you put Romney Care together in Massachusetts. You know, these people are all alike, whether it's the leftist Obama types or the rhinos and Romney types. They're trying to pretend that they had no role in the destruction that they have created in this country in order to build their own little political empires and satisfy their own political ambitions. Well, I'm sorry. The last people I'm going to blame are working people who do their best to make sure that these scheming politicians don't get a hold of too many of their dollars. I'm not going to blame them. Because at the end of the day, I think they're the people who actually are sitting there saying, well, I don't care for this dependency-minded stuff. I don't care if Mitt Romney worries about me or Obama worries about me. I'll worry about myself. I just want to make sure they don't get the mitts on a dollar that they shouldn't be getting so that I can use that for my children and my plans and my future and my family's future. That's perfectly okay by me, Stan. And well, I don't understand criticizing people for that.
There was an Alabama Supreme Court judge named Learned Hand who said exactly that. There's no sin in minimizing in any way legally you can how much you give the government. And probably he was a personal hero of Greg, would be my guess. All right, I want to shift gears a bit. I want to talk about China. China is now claiming to have banned forced abortion. Now, I'll start with you, Greg. Do you believe anything that the Chinese government says, and do you believe this?
No, I do not believe anything that comes out of China, because as you know, we see it now in our own media. The media is a propaganda tool over there. I would applaud the banning of forced abortion. I would applaud the banning of all abortion. I am dead down the road anti-abortion. I believe that what is in the womb is life. My very first high school textbook, I bet you can't find these words in a high school textbook now, but my very first biology high school textbook said, life begins at conception. When we got to the chapter on reproduction, it said very clearly, life begins at conception. Human life begins at conception. It was in the textbook. Now, those were the words in 1973 before they went and rewrote the books after Roe v. Wade. I believe that those are the words that should still be in the book, but no, I don't believe the Chinese government on this.
Chief?
Well, it's a known fact. It's obvious that liberals will lie, cheat, rob, and murder to get their way. If they're willing to murder innocent unborn babies, they're certainly willing to lie about not doing it.
And I go a step further. I would tell you folks that China is built on the concept that government is in charge and people are simply another resource, another asset that government utilizes in accomplishing what government wants to do. And I think that, as harsh as that sounds, that's exactly why in this country we saw personnel departments become human resource departments. That whole concept, which started many years ago, was pushed by Sanger types, devil worshippers. But in essence, that's exactly what it is. The human being is simply another resource. The Prince of Wales, the husband of Queen Elizabeth, said there comes a time in history when the human herd needs to be culled. Alan?
Well, that I, as you know, am not only strongly against it, I think standing against the violation of the unalienable right to life is one of the basic precepts that's required in order to maintain the integrity of the foundations of our way of life. The Chinese, of course, have no commitment to respect for unalienable rights. They're a thoroughgoing and have been a totalitarian communist regime. They've been experimenting, though, Stan, as you know, with maintaining that control while trying in various ways in order to reap the benefits of a system that allows people a little bit more initiative. They've been trying to experiment with this and that. I frankly don't believe it's changed the basic mentality of their system, the basic principle of it, which is fear, centralized control, intimidation. I will say this, though. I think that looking as they probably are at what's going on in what used to be the free world, they've begun to realize that without the appearance of force, compulsion can still be applied. So you can say with one side of your mouth, we're not going to force people to have abortions. But then, since you're controlling access to health care and jobs and everything else, you can more or less force them to have abortions, right? By manipulating their lives. In that respect, I think they're probably becoming more image conscious. And they're going to try to make the world believe that they're being less directly, violently compulsive in their persecution of people. And I think that episodes like the one where we got the sight of the man who was being persecuted and his family being brutalized because of this issue, that I think affected them. And they now are more conscious of the image they have in the world than they used to be. And so I think that probably explains why they're putting up this sort of facade. But it's hard to believe in that lack of compulsion when a society is structured so as to implement compulsion in every respect. It's part of what I anticipate as the problem of having socialist healthcare in this country, Stan. When you have a little Politburo style party thing going on, whether it's the two-party sham or the one-party domination, where politicians and their cronies get to control the access to life and death health care. I think there's going to be a lot of compulsion going on behind that, don't you?
Well,
I think
absolutely.
once you let people have that kind of gatekeeper power, you have essentially turned your fate over to them, and they are putting chains on your mind at that point. They don't have to point a gun to your head because they've got a gun pointed inside your head that you're holding on to and saying, I better not shoot myself with these people or my whole life and livelihood or the access to health care for my kids will be destroyed. And that's still compulsion. That's still government by fear and inner terrorization of your population.
All right. Alabama Planned Parenthood was sued. They botched an abortion, which Planned Parenthood does on an ongoing basis. Most of it is covered up. They cover up for pedophiles. They cover up for rapes. They cover up for lots of things. People die. They cover up even when people die. Let me start with you, Greg, because Alabama Planned Parenthood is where you are. Is in your state, are they starting to stand up against Planned Parenthood and giving them government money to kill people?
That drumbeat has been growing steadily louder, especially as more and more word has been spreading in the black community thanks to efforts of a number of groups to educate people on the real racist past of the Margaret Sanger and her groups. Remember, this was also the site of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. So people are very ready to listen to this message. Reverend Childress is behind this message as well, and we've been putting out his videos on black genocide. And we've actually been pretty vocal on this ourselves individually, but I'm not going to blow my own horn because I'm just a bit player on this. But we have been getting these videos. We've been getting them out to folks. We've written several articles on our own website about it, detailing the history, the ties between the KKK and Sanger and her eugenics movement and the Negro problem and culling the weeds, the absolute language of this. And what is happening is actually, in many respects, the black pastors have been the key. They're the ones turning on Sunday morning and speaking out against this, just as they are speaking out against Obama for gay marriage and a host of other issues. The black pastors have been the key, and they're the ones that our outreach has been reaching, and they're the ones listening, and they're the ones spreading the message. So, yes, the white evangelical movement has been strongly against Planned Parenthood for a very long time, but the statistics have always been that the abortion in Alabama has been heavily black, and it has been heavily into black community, and it has been that community that has to turn against it in order to have any success, and we are having some great success at the grassroots level with this.
Terrific. Chief?
We talked earlier about the importance of telling the truth, and I think this is a topic that really demands a lot of truth. And I blame the GOP for a lot of the information not getting out properly. What I mean by that is the GOP, especially the establishment, has for a long time been scared to death to go take a stance because they're so afraid they're going to turn off some Democrats or turn off some moderate independent voters. But in this case, what the GOP and all of us have to do is quit using terms like procedures or abortions and talk about killing unborn babies. And like Greg has just said, which is excellent, to show pictures and videos of what really happens, because very early on, these lives that are formed at conception, it's life at conception, turn into what looks like and appears to anybody, even kindergartners can tell you, that's a baby when they see an ultrasound or something like that. But we need to take this from the abstract of just a story about some woman in an abortion clinic somewhere getting a procedure into talk about the reality of a poor woman was deceived by Planned Parenthood and forced to kill her own baby in this dirty operating room, and she's taken the life of her own baby, and talk about those kind of issues and make it real for people and not just an abstract theoretical situation.
In California, they're now saying you don't even have to be a doctor to perform an abortion. I guess they want jobs for the butchers union. Alan?
I think, Stan, that one of the things that to me testifies to the power and glory of God in this country still is the fact that in spite of the fact that you have people building up as some kind of symbol of big black historic achievement, the high priest of the culture of death, as I call Barack Obama, right? This man who has really been dedicated to the most extremist form of commitment to so-called abortion rights, including the one that says kill the baby after the baby has come out of the womb if it survived an abortion attempt, because that will to murder that nascent child has to be carried out, right? That was the position he took in the Illinois State Senate. And in spite of the fact that this guy gets elevated and everybody's sort of preaching that he's the big example of black achievement and all, nonetheless, the truth that's being spread out there by the dedicated work of Maafa 21 and the folks who are showing the videos and spreading the truth about Margaret Sanger and the pastors finally speaking out, I think that's starting to have an impact, and it shows that truth has power if you're willing to bear faithful witness to it. I have to second the motion, though, from my personal experience of what the chief said about the GOP. Now, a lot of you will remember that I spent many years in the GOP and ran as a candidate and so forth. I ran against Obama in Illinois. And one of the things I did, maybe the main reason, in fact, that I went in there was to bear witness against his heinous and abominable commitment to abortion rights, up to and including infanticide, the killing of fully born infants, or at least letting them die because they were the target of abortion. And I stood by this and talked to them and so forth. I can't tell you the efforts these people made to try to get me to back down. Even set up private meetings with a couple of preachers I remember once who were telling me, yo, you're a politician, you shouldn't be preaching, and so forth and so on. I'm thinking, I preached the Declaration, you're all unalienable rights and all that come from God. And it would seem to me that pastors would want to second that motion, not tell me to shut up about it. And I refused. But it was their intent, whether you're talking about gay marriage or the protection of the innocent life of the unborn, the defense of the natural family and so on. They want to back away from it. They want to hide from it. And what's worse, I think, on the issue of gay marriage, they just want to betray it. They want to go over to the other side. And follow the advice of that Rupert Murdoch who owns Fox. I hope people are wising up to Fox. Stan, do you think people are wising up to the fact that Fox News Network is not what it's been cracked up to be, and lately has really been starting to tilt in the wrong direction openly? It was always quietly, I think, amassing a little capital with conservatives so it could betray them. Well, the other day, I was reading an interview with Murdoch, and he's saying Mitt Romney ought to ignore the far-right fringe, and he characterized in that fringe people who support traditional marriage and so forth. Since when are 60 to 80% of the voters in this country, which is what happens in these state votes, every time people are asked, 60 to 80% vote in support of the God-endowed natural family, right? That's a fringe. That's a far-right fringe to this guy. And he's advising Romney to just ignore that sentiment and pander to these people who want homosexual marriage and to redefine what family life is all about because these other folks have no place to go. Did you read that?
Yep.
It's disgraceful, the mentality these people are promoting. And that, sadly, has been altogether too typical of this elitist leadership in the GOP. Not the grassroots, by the way. And I always try to get people to focus on this fact. These people live off the political capital of sincere, deeply committed advocates of life and family and respect for the God-endowed definition of marriage and so forth. And then they will follow the advice of their billionaire breakfast club manipulators behind the scene and betray the folks who go into the voting booth to put them into power. It's sickening. And I just think people ought to wake up to it and start making sure that they refuse to go along with folks when they're playing these treacherous games. Final point, I think there's a governing plurality out there anyway, that, and it's actually a majority if you could really focus the issues, that we see every time moral issues are put to the people, pretty much. And I always say to people, what if you could make folks see that the fundamental divide in this country was the divide that separates
Alan, we lost your volume.
Who want to respect the unalienable right to life, respect the God-endowed family. That constitutes a majority. And those people represent a coalition that you ought to be going after, because if you could turn every election into a referendum on that acknowledgement of God, see, then you'd win elections at every level. And you and I both know it. You'd break up this business of blacks voting for the Democrats and so forth, because Christian-minded people, black and white, would vote for God's way, because unalienable rights-minded people would vote for God's way, because people who want to defend the unalienable liberties of our people would vote for that God-acknowledging declaration way. But I'll be honest with you, Stan. The GOP elitist leadership doesn't want to do that. They don't want to go that way. They would rather lose than put together that governing coalition. They would rather tear Todd Aiken down because he's standing for the heart and will of those people than lift him up to victory in spite of their commitment against everything he believes. Think about that. I think it's atrocious. And I think that folks need to wise up, because I think it's pretty obvious that these kind of folks who are exploiting people to get power don't represent them. And if you keep letting them exploit you, then you are killing representative government in America. Because in spite of so-called elections, you're going in there making a choice amongst people you don't believe in, and so you get a government you can't believe in. People who don't represent you, and so you get a government that doesn't represent you, in a society where our government's supposed to be based on representation. It's just wrong. And I think more people are waking up to it. More people in the black community waking up to the reality of the lies they've been told by these folks about abortion and so forth, and more people in general just waking up to the fact that the only way we're going to get this country straight is when people start listening to their own convictions, not the propaganda lies that are being fed to them from both parties in order to mask the elite's abandonment of the decent heart of our people.
Well said. We'll be back in just a moment with more right here on Talk to Solomon with Ambassador Alan Keyes, Greg Howard, and Chief Steve. I like to eat. Do you like to eat? We all do. And usually we run to the grocery store, we run to the convenience store, or we have something in the fridge. But power's been out in parts of this country in the last few weeks. We don't know what's going to come down the pike economically. Smart people are putting in food. Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves is a line of foods that you can put away that will last for a very long time. You know, they say eat what you store and store what you eat. This is great tasting stuff, healthy for you, a full line. You go to our website, cpnlive.com, and click on the button for Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves and see all the different things we have. This is good tasting food. It's reasonably priced. It will last. And it's worth its weight in gold if a problem arises. I know you don't think there's going to be anything that goes wrong. Actually, you do. This is smart. This is smart insurance. This is smart preparation. This is smart thinking. You have kids, you have a spouse, you have parents, you have dependents, you have an appetite. All those things can be addressed by a frugal but smart investment in Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves. Try them out. You will be tickled to death with the taste of them. You know what? In many cases, people start to eat this and they think, heck, this tastes better and costs less than what you're going to the grocery store to buy. cpnlive.com, check it out. Hey, my name is Stan Solomon, and you know if I have something to say, I'll say it. And I'll only tell you the truth because I'm a Republican, not a Democrat. Democrats always lie. Republicans only lie half the time. I don't lie at all. This is the Fuel Mule. It's an extraordinary product that was developed by a friend of mine, an engineer, and it increases the fuel mileage on your vehicle. If you have a combustion engine, this will increase your mileage by 10 to 20%. It bolts around your fuel line. You can install it yourself or have your mechanic do it. It is an extraordinary item, and it flat works. I've been using it for more than 10 years. It's increased my mileage on every vehicle I put it on, and by the way, it will last forever. You can get rid of your vehicle, just take it off and put it on the next one. Go to cpnlive.com. You'll have more information there. You can order it right there. We absolutely guarantee you'll be satisfied. The Fuel Mule. It's a way to kick down your cost of fuel and kick up your mileage. Don't you love the name? I thought of it. The Fuel Mule. Let me ask you a question. Do you like being sick? I have in my hand an incredible product. It's called TR10 supercolloidal silver. TR10 stands for a trace to the negative 10th power. The particles in this silver product are 6 to 8 angstroms, 6 to 8 10 billionths of a meter. Now listen to me. Silver has been the magic bullet for all of human existence. The Egyptians used silver instruments. We use silverware. They put silver in your teeth because nothing can grow on silver. Silver will kill anything but liberalism. I'm working on that. This product, you go to cpnlive.com, buy 1 quart of this product. It will last you for a very long time. Anytime you feel like you've been exposed to something bad, take some of this product, spray it in your mouth, or take a little bit and gargle it, swallow it. It will kill any pathogen. The average antibiotic kills 10 to 20 different pathogens. This product will kill 700 plus. Do yourself a favor, do your family a favor, do your doctor a favor. He's tired of seeing you. Get supercolloidal silver. Go to cpnlive.com, order the product. It's $29.95 plus shipping. I think it's $39.95 delivered any place in America right to your door. It's worth 10 times that. Check it out. If you're not 100% happy, just return it and we'll give you your money back.